there's been a real concerted effort by the British Crown to basically slander me and slander Global and slander all sorts of BS. I have taken the high road in all this and ignored it as much as I could. And I finally decided to clear away and shove it back down their throats this week. So I've been busily doing that and contacting the relevant authorities to make sure that they get the point and are put back in their respective boxes. Anyway, I'm sorry that I had to take some time out of otherwise very important work to deal with wagging tongues and senseless ideas. We need to deal with some structural problems that affect the world banking community and which directly affects everything from our mom and pop economy of our homes and families all the way up to international governmental business. Essentially, we are unwinding a monopoly that has been illegally and secretly established in control of world banking services. And this has been the core problem for a long time. It goes beyond the Rockefeller bottlenecking that they're famous for, their transfer monopoly, SWIFT, and is embedded deep into the very structure of the commercial banking system. And we didn't automatically and immediately know just how bad this was or how it was structured. So we had to go back and do some research to figure out how something that happened 80 years ago resulted in the current mess. Thankfully, we were able to do that. And as a result, we stand a chance of being able to unravel it and bring it back into correct operation and do so in a way that will not harm people or businesses, really. We just need to find a way of unwinding a situation. And I think we've succeeded in doing that. There are a lot of different aspects to this. I think it's important that everybody understands that it was a matter of ego and selfishness that led certain groups of people who were hiding behind corporate aliases, people that were hiding behind the corporate veil, and who were operating essentially as little cells, little almost like con artist operations, like the Sting, right? Where they were using various kinds of legal chicanery and fraud gambits and secrecy to do things that were designed to benefit them at the expense of the public. And we have had a long, long slog to get down to the bottom of it. But I do believe that we've done so. And I do believe that we now have the support, attention, and the proactive support, I should say, of those persons who can voluntarily bring this system into compliance. I think it's no secret to anyone that monopolies are illegal. And the fact that we have monopoly interests in control of world banking should be a concern to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're looking at the licensed monopoly and licensed criminal enterprise of the central banks and realizing that it's impossible to license things that are against the public law via legislation, which is exactly what they've purported to do. Or if it's a monopoly over commercial banking worldwide, which is what the British Crown has established in collusion with their Roman municipal corporation collaborators. And they did this by making it appear that they were operating two different systems when actually they were operating only one system, and also when they had illegally seized upon and unlawfully converted our land jurisdiction commercial banks. If you would think about it, land jurisdiction connects directly to the air jurisdiction, just as the sea jurisdiction connects directly with the air jurisdiction. So when you have a land-air bank using that connection, you wind up with a commercial bank. When you have a sea-air connection, you wind up with a bank of commerce. But they have been seizing upon and operating our commercial banks under law and as if they were banks of commerce. So they've combined all of their banks of commerce with our commercial banks to create a monopoly in the realm of commerce. And they have gone so far as to use bank names and bank trademarks while they've actually converted those institutions into securities brokerages. So they've been basically hiding behind the corporate veil and making use of assets that they purloined to carry on business in a deceptive fashion. They haven't even had the good grace to admit it when they changed the function of a quote-unquote bank to a completely different function. They've continued to use the name bank in much the same way that they've continued to use the name court when they converted the courts into bill collection agencies. So all of this is very dishonest, very deceptive, very deceitful, and it is grounds to demand the dissolution of these corporations, the removal of the corporate veil, and the direct punishment of those who have run these organizations to the detriment of the public. And that is what they're afraid of. And frankly, that's what they should be afraid of. That's what they deserve. They knew that they were doing this. They did it anyway. They chose profit over virtue of any kind, and they caused great suffering and loss to innocent people who were in fact the source and the true owners of all the assets that these banks have controlled. As Hunter Aki is always fond of saying, we are the value. We're not just the value in and of ourselves, we are the owners of the value. So this is a situation where a lot of deep thinking has been involved by a lot of people. And as we have come to terms and realized the depth of the corruption and the depth of the deceit that has been worked by numerous corporations, it's calling into question the use of corporations as a practice. I mean, all corporations are being called into question because, well, you can see the banks have screwed up and used corporate status to do horrible harm to the public and to the national governments. The incorporated S corps and B corps, not so much B corps, but S corps and C corps, have done inestimable damage to the public in cases like Pfizer, Monsanto, Bayer, IG Farben. These organizations have not been content with being protected when they undertake activities like, say, producing dynamite. Dynamite can be used for good purposes, like a controlled demolition of a building, or it can be used for war, or it can be used for mining, or it can be used for, it can be used improperly for a illegal mercenary conflict. I mean, dynamite, just using it as an example, is not good or evil in and of itself, but it can be put to good or evil purposes. And so the manufacturers of dynamite, in order to avoid undue risk to themselves and yet produce a useful product, which is subject to misuse, were given protection as corporate entities. And I think we all understand that. What we don't understand is when corporations have set out to deliberately harm the public by producing products and then directing their use through collaborators, which is what we saw during the COVID-19 fiasco. And in those cases, there is no doubt in my mind, and I think there should be no doubt in your mind, that those corporations are owed no protection whatsoever. And neither is the US Congress Incorporated, which guaranteed them a carte blanche no matter what they put in vaccines. I think that those days of reckoning with these corporations and these individual boards of directors who have taken actions knowingly and willingly and with malice aforethought to harm the public interest and to harm the public good, I think those days are coming quickly to an end, and those people who have been the perpetrators behind this are being recognized as the criminals that they are. Unfortunately, the corruption and the criminality did not stop in 1986 when the then U.S. Congress Incorporated voted to offer the vaccine manufacturers carte blanche and guaranteed them that no matter what they put in vaccines, they would be held harmless from claims and suits against them by the U.S. Congress Incorporated. The corruption has continued to this very day, and we know that because when the entire COVID-19 fiasco was unrolled, the present members of the Congress uniformly voted to exempt themselves and their staff and their families and the family of the staff members from any requirement to take the COVID-19 vaccine. And that is a smoking gun admission that they knew that the vaccine was harmful, and they chose to exempt themselves from harm that they visited on the trusting American public. This indicates that they deserve no protection as a corporate entity. The corporate veil must be stripped away, and they must be made to pay for what they did. And they don't want to face that either. They're all trying to cover each other's butts. But in this situation, the facts speak so loudly for themselves that there is an inevitable coming to justice. And there is an inevitable discussion taking place. And that discussion revolves not only around these instances and examples. There are many, many examples that I can bring up, but I'm just using Pfizer as an example. It's beyond just these individual corporations. And the heart of the discussion is, should corporations exist at all? Does the benefit and utility of organizing business in this way justify the risks and the potential for corruption and harm that we're seeing? And I think that overall the answer is no. We are not benefited by incorporating businesses and taking on a share of the risk of these businesses. We are not benefited by providing them bankruptcy protection and then suffering acts of corruption and violence against the public interest. So the further discussion is, should corporations exist at all? Now, the Pope and the Roman Curia were supposed to ride herd on these creations. They were supposed to discipline them, and when they went off the farm and started acting in unlawful and dangerous and corrupt ways, they were supposed to liquidate these corporations. But that responsibility was not adequately or responsibly enforced. A great many people didn't even realize that the Pope and the Curia were responsible for disciplining corporations. I don't know who they thought was responsible for it, but they didn't know that it was under ecclesiastical law. And so when all of this gets brought up and discussed, it's a little bit like an archaeological dig. You are bringing up facts and discussions and actions that took place in various conventions and organizational minutes of meetings and things that happened 150 years ago or more. And it comes as a surprise to many people in the modern world that, oh, this is the way it was supposed to work. Just like we've been getting some information in about the provost marshals and the role of the provost marshals as the interface of the U.S. Army, the United States Army, with the civilian population of this country. People were unaware, even the provost marshals were unaware, that they had a principal role to defend civilians from illegal confiscation and harassment. And yet they do. It's very, very clear in the historical records, and they have no answer for us. Now, some of the provost marshal offices have begun to recognize us and to take care of us. It's not an across-the-board phenomenon yet, but that's the way it should be. They should be acting as the public interface for the occupying forces. Now, the greater thing is that there shouldn't be any occupying forces. There wasn't a war, there was only a mercenary conflict, and without the dignity of war in back of it, it's an illegal mercenary occupation. So we're looking at a situation where, yes, the provost marshals owe the public defense, but in another way, the provost marshals and the army should not be occupying a position as an occupation force of our own country. And this has been artificially prolonged and promoted and kept hidden from the public for 150, 160 years. So you can begin to see the enormity of the crime, the enormity of the fraud, and the enormity of the graft and harm that has been done. And it's not just to our country, it's to all countries that have been touched by this fraud. Unfortunately, that means just about all of them. We also then inherited a large share of the responsibility to correct the fraud. And I think one of the things that has been difficult for people to understand is that they have been redefined as things as part of the overall plot to defraud and denigrate people for the enrichment of the corporations and the evil men who were using the corporations as storefronts for their own egotistical, nasty, greedy, selfish, criminal exploits. We've really gone full tilt and looked at all of these different things this past week, and it's been fascinating, folks. It's really been fascinating to see how something that started out as a mistake just continued to expand and spiral out of control until here we are, looking at this gargantuan fraud, this incredible corruption, and the criminality that has been spawned because of it. However, I can report we've made good progress in all of those discussions. We have found some new fast friends that are assisting us. We have found many allies in other countries that see the same problems that we see and who are busily researching their own history and who are coming forward to protest the illegal commercial occupation, mercenary occupation of their countries. One of the problems being that in terms of bureaucracy, very few countries are in as good a position as we are to simply take over a bureaucracy and begin to operate it in our own right again. Many countries, their traditional national government has been totally destroyed. There was no federation of states left functioning. There was no principality and a government with a bureaucracy sufficient to provide services. And so they're having to rebuild. And in some cases, like Canada and Australia, they're having to create portions of the government that never existed ever in history. So there has been a lot of progress. A lot of things have happened that are good this past week. And I want to reassure you that we have gained a lot of traction and we've gained a lot of respect. And we have been able to help not only our position on the board, but we've been able to help other people throughout the world who are struggling with the same issues of resuscitating their lawful governments. We have some good funding options that are beginning to surface. We're starting to open up the Blue Dot bilateral bank network so that more and more resources are enabled to come online. There's been significant movement, I would call it a rational forward movement in recouping the assets of the Avila Trust in the sea jurisdiction and the air jurisdiction. That is, just a step by step what needs to be done. And the other trustees in those jurisdictions are pursuing it now and getting it finalized. So I haven't had to do anything yet regarding that, but it does come back to me as the fiduciary of the estate in the land and soil jurisdiction. So sooner or later that will all get straightened out too. And the central banks will have to come into compliance with standards that guarantee that they operate in a lawful fashion. Now, the commodity rigging that the central banks have engaged in is a crime. We all know that commodity rigging is a crime. And they made the argument more than a century ago that they should be able to commit this crime in the name of preventing market fluctuations and bank runs and all this other stuff. They said that they were going to be able to address if we would just let them rig commodities. And so the legislatures, not knowing that legislatures do not have the ability to create that kind of law and do not have the ability to license criminal activities, went ahead and went through the motions to license the central banks to rig commodities and allowed them to do so all the time without having any authority to do this themselves. And anyway, the central banks got going real hard and heavy, and you can see what they've done. They did not prevent bank runs. They did not prevent stock market crashes, and they did not overall benefit society or the public at large in any way, shape, or form. They did nothing that they promised to do. They delivered none of the benefits that they claimed they would produce, and they have no reason to be. They simply don't. The way to cooperatively plan for, a share of commodity markets is to do so by cooperative agreements. And instead of seeking mutually beneficial accommodations for production of commodities, having beneficial trade agreements, redirecting production to additional commodities, things that could be done on a rational basis. They just handed all responsibility over to the central banks and let the central banks strong arm the commodity markets and manipulate them, with the result that some people became fantastically wealthy and other people became impoverished. And some products, like oil, for example, crude oil, became very, very expensive. And other products, like cotton, became almost worthless by comparison. And this was all due to commodity rigging and activities that the central banks influenced and manipulated via control of currencies. We look at this and we think that the only thing that the Fed ever did was tinker around with the prime interest rate, which was the interest rate that the Fed charged other banks on Federal Reserve notes supplied to the banks, or to credit supplied to the banks as money of account. That isn't all that the Fed did. That isn't even 1/10 of what the Fed did. And so that gives you some idea of the extent of the market manipulations and the commodity manipulations and the gross market manipulations that were indulged in by these central banks all over the world. And none of it, for the most part, was beneficial to the public. It was benefiting, certain groups. It was benefiting certain industries, but it was not overall benefiting the public, the people. So those are the kinds of things I've been wrestling with this week. And I guess I can report to you that so far we've got about 75% of it nailed down, and it's going in our favor. That's wonderful in terms of feeling secure that the real problems are finally being addressed. All of Africa is now in the process of setting up individual accounts. Every country in Africa has signed up to participate in our global family bank effort. And additional efforts are underway in all the other countries. But certainly we should be moving ourselves along and getting more and more people engaged and excited and ready to move on this, because this is the means by which people can get an account and receive back both money and credit that is owed to them, literally owed to them. And it's owed to people throughout the world. It is not just Americans. But for some reason, Americans have been lagging behind and been kind of slow on the uptake, even though the entire effort was launched here, right here in America, by your very own government. And me, who became unwittingly at the time, but actually became the fiduciary for the entire world, because all of the ugly stuff, all the corruption, our country had been used as basically the storefront for it. Anyway, make sure everybody gets a global account I mean, some of you have had a global account for years now, and you're sitting there scratching your ears and wondering when or if this is ever going to launch. Well, it launches as you participate, as more and more people get accounts, and as more and more people stand on the land and soil. And I guess to that effect and to that point, I need to bring it forward to your attention again that you can declare yourself. You can declare your nationality. You can stand up and say, hey, I'm an American standing on the land and soil of Connecticut. Okay? And you never, ever have to join your state assembly. You can just make your declaration and have your account in Global and get your money and your credit back. And you can use the Global system throughout to do that. Global has a land recording and publishing system that is built into the Global structure, and you can use that to make your declaration and to record it and to publish it. And then you can get your account and you can receive back the money you're owed and you can receive back the credit you're owed. So you do not have to actually join your state assembly in order to get a Global account and make your declaration. The two things are separate. Now, I personally encourage everyone to participate in their state assembly because that is their government. And your government has to function and be present and protect you and do the things that the government is supposed to do, which is largely to make decisions about what the people want done. Okay? So yeah, if you want a voice, if you want to make sure that money is being spent responsibly and that your needs are being met, certainly you should participate in your state assembly at both the state level and the county level. But if you, for whatever reason, don't want to participate in the county and state assemblies, you are a free man or woman. You don't have to donate your time and money, not even to your own government. So I want to make that clear too. There are plenty of ASNs out there who, for whatever reason, have not chosen to join the local county or state assembly. And that's their right. The government in this country cannot compel you to serve it in any capacity, and doesn't. It's to your ultimate best interest to keep an eye on what's going on in the government. It's to your ultimate best interest to have a voice in what the government does, how it spends its money, what priorities it follows and chases after. You know, it's just common sense, folks. But if you don't want to have a voice and you don't want to keep an eye on what's going on, that's entirely your choice. You don't have to join. You're still going to be a New Yorker, whether or not you join the New York Assembly. However, if you want an account and you want to get your money and your credit back, you are going to have to declare on the land and soil of New York, if you're a New Yorker, and you're going to have to sign up through Global to get an account. And I hope I'm making this absolutely crystal clear for everyone. Joining the assembly is not a requirement of getting a bank account. And getting a bank account does not make you a member of the assembly, other than in a very generalized way. You're counted as a New Yorker, for example, but that won't get you a place on the New York Assembly. In order to actually have a voice and have a voting right and be able to influence what the government of your state does, you have to join the state assembly as a separate act. So I hope that this makes sense to everybody. If it doesn't, be sure and get to the coordinator call on Thursday and get the questions answered. And with that, I will ask Shannon for the first question.
Bum, bum, bum. Oh. All right, first question. Can M.O.C.E.E process be used to purchase big items such as a home or automobile?
The Mutual Offset Credit Exemption Exchange, otherwise known as a MOSI, is a debt swap program in which we are supposed to be able to swap debts that they owe us for debts that we owe them. So think about this. Do we owe them for their services under the Constitution? The 18 enumerated powers are attached to 18 enumerated services which they agree to provide and which we agree to pay for. So do we owe them for their services? Yes, we do. Within the limitations of the constitutions as stated, we owe them for those services that are attached to the enumerated powers. So we owe them money. Do they owe us money? Yes, they do. Because they've indebted themselves above and beyond, far beyond any kind of service of the enumerated powers. They've gone off and spent money on all sorts of things and racked it up against our credit, and then they have had the interest rates racking up on all of it. So yeah, they owe us a lot more than we owe them, but we both owe each other, and so you have a debt swap situation, and that's what the MOSI is for. That's why it's called a mutual offset credit exchange exemption. As I have long noticed and long pointed out to you, you have a great deal of credit that has been prepaid with actual goods and services, which has not been credited to your account, and which you have not been able to spend in any way. Now, that prepaid credit can be directly applied to the national debt once we work out the means to do that. But in the meantime, you can use a MOTSI, a mutual offset credit exemption exchange, to do things like if they allege that you owe them a mortgage, you can say, well, yeah, well, this foreign person owes a mortgage, but I don't, and I choose to use some of my credit to swap out the debt and have it erased, right? Now, this is what should have been going on all the while. That would have kept their national debt from spiraling into something insurmountable. Because when we discharged what we owed them against what they owed us, it would naturally reduce their debt. In a way, they refused payment when they refused to set up the MOTSI program and make it a publicly accessible program. And that's something I've been discussing, among all the other things, this past week, is that they need to face up to their failure to provide remedy that they promised the American people back in the 1930s. And it's precisely that failure to carry through and provide the remedy that they published, and which legalized their actions, by the way, has resulted in the present situation. Now, when we have used the MOTSI process in the past, and these have been forwarded to the various officials that are supposed to be responsible, we've had a very spotty response. Sometimes the mortgage gets canceled and the credit gets applied, and other times it doesn't. And there's no rhyme or reason or explanation why. So you can apply for a MOTSI through the United States Secretary of State's office. You can apply for a MOTSI through the Secretary of the Treasury's office. But there's no guarantee that they will honor it, or that they will honor it in a reasonable amount of time. We've had situations where a MOTSI exemption has been claimed, and it's taken 8 years to actually get that done. So, some of them are responded to and are taken off the books right away, within a year. I say right away, that's right away for the MOTSI process. But some of them have taken 8 years. So until we get that remedy actually working, and the United States Secretary of State realizes that he was left with the job by the British Parliament and actually takes action to provide access to the American public, which he should certainly do because it would reduce their national debt, we're kind of up a creek on that one. It's certainly worth making the claim. It's certainly worth sending it in. I'm sure that even though it took 8 years, people were happy to have that erased and have their mortgage zeroed out. Still, I can't guarantee at this point that it's going to be answered in a reasonable time. So that's what a MOTSI is, and that's how it works. We swap some of their debt for some of our debt, and the whole thing gets zeroed out. Their national debt goes down, and our national credit goes down. I hope that explains it.
Okay, on to the next question. If a child of an ASN passes away, what is the process?
Boy, what a sad prospect that is. I'm so sorry. If a child passes away, it depends on the age of the child, and it depends on whether or not the child is engaged and has been brought into their system or not. It would require more information for me to make a responsible reply.
Okay, next question involving that. Is the ER called, and do we need a death certificate? And is there a private mortuary business in place for such an occasion?
You always want to get a death certificate because this is what their organizations will require as proof that someone actually died. So yes, you want to obtain a death certificate. There aren't any specific mortuaries that I know of. The place that you would look would be a Global's vendor program. Global has a separate vendor site which lists independent businesses which have signed up as vendors under the Global vendor program. And there may or may not be mortuary services that are listed there in your state within, a reasonable distance. We're just, we've got thousands and thousands of businesses that are already signed up as part of the Global vendor program. But I can't guarantee that there's someone in your community.
Okay, next I have a question about home ownership. If American state nationals can own physical, tangible property, why would we be concerned about reversing all foreclosures and evictions since the majority of these have been executed against U.S. citizens? We understand all mortgages are fraudulent, but one standing matters in all other instances. Why not here?
The answer is that we're dealing with thugs. And those thugs are ignorant. They don't know that they're doing anything wrong. They think that they are enforcing legitimate laws and that you are the subject of those laws. They really believe it. It's not true, but they nonetheless believe it. I made the statement that the state of Alaska troopers have the same exact legal standing as the Crips and the Bloods, two gangs from California that are well known. And, that's an outrageous statement. It is nonetheless true. The state of Alaska troopers would not believe that it was true, but it is true because they are acting as private security personnel for a foreign corporation. And they are going out wearing their uniforms, just like the gangs wear their colors. And they are actually under armed force stealing the homes and personal property of Americans under color of law. They are pretending that there is a law that applies to those Americans that they are enforcing. But in fact, the law that they are enforcing applies to corporations, legal fiction persons that don't even exist. So this is a privateering operation. It is literally armed robbery under color of law. They are impersonating actual peacekeeping officials, actual officers of our law. And they've been getting away with it so long that they believe their own lies. And they bring up entire generations of people who believe those same lies through a process of indoctrination, which is another subject I brought up recently. Kim Cooper was one of those people that was very, very deeply indoctrinated as a child. And that became very clear to me as I was talking to her and trying to explain various aspects of the government structure and how things are actually supposed to work versus how they have been working. And, I'm very sorry, I know I hurt her feelings, and I know that she did not understand that I was talking about her indoctrination and was not commenting on her mental acuity. But when you are very deeply indoctrinated, it can keep you from seeing things that are right in front of your face. And it can render you unable to take in new information or see things from a different perspective that's necessary. And so both of those things have come up this past week. And I am at a loss. How can you help people get past indoctrination so that they can see the truth, which is right in front of their faces? Like the truth that the police forces that we are used to seeing are not actually our public service officers. They're actually what we would call in this country Pinkertons, private security personnel hired by commercial corporations. And the history of that is that the Pinkertons, which is a very famous personal security organization from England, was allowed to come into this country under a special act of the then Congress to protect the mail and to protect corporate payrolls on trains going from the East Coast to the West Coast that were constantly being robbed by groups of outlaws. And so the Pinkertons were hired as corporate security personnel, and they came to this country and they rode the rails, and they were hired to stop people like Jesse James from robbing trains. And that was allowed because the trains were on a public utility corridor, on a public transportation vehicle, and therefore they could use those international officers, the Pinkertons, to come to this country and protect the U.S. mail and the foreign corporation payrolls that were being transported to California mostly. Well, that just spooled out and was normalized, I guess you could say. And so today what we have are subsidiaries or franchises of foreign governmental services corporations headquartered in DC that have county of franchises. And then they hire their own personal security officers that are called law enforcement officers. And these law enforcement officers think that they're legitimately sheriffs and legitimately deputy sheriffs. And in fact, they are foreign corporation security personnel who have no authority to address Americans at all. And they're going out and they're evicting people from their homes under false pretenses. And they're doing it under color of law and armed force. And this is something that the provost marshals should be coming in and stomping on like Godzilla. And we're just now getting to the point in the entire conversation where the provost marshals are having to admit that, yes, that is their duty. And no, they haven't been doing it. And yes, it is necessary and needed to prevent crime. And those specific crimes are called latching, illegal salvage operations in the jurisdiction of the sea, and illegal takings on the jurisdiction of the land, which is forbidden under all the federal constitutions. So we're just now getting to a point where we can get enforcement against these people who have been hired as personal security for corporations, and it's been crazy, but we've finally gotten to the point where enough people are seeing the truth and enough people are understanding how it got to be this way, and enough people are realizing the absolute need to stand up and prevent these crimes from happening. But it's been a long, weary road, and there are some people like him who, no matter how long you work with them and you talk to them and you show them things and you observe things to them, their indoctrination is so strong that they literally cannot see what's right in front of their faces. And that's why you want to be careful about any kind of resistance to an actual eviction. Because these guys believe that they're doing the right thing. They believe that they're officers of the law when actually they're just officers of corporate policy. They're enforcing corporate policies and banking rules, okay, that apply only to government employees and their direct dependents. But you don't want to mess with them because they are so firmly indoctrinated and they believe so completely that they're in the right, and they're armed. They have guns. They will shoot you because they're ignorant, because they don't even know what they're doing. It's like Jesus said, forgive them because they know not what they do. It's our job to make them aware of what they're doing. It's our job to make their bosses aware of what they're doing. It's our job to bring it out into the diplomatic forums of the world and make everybody aware of what they're doing so that they get stopped. And unfortunately, that means either paying the mortgage and not baiting the bear, or if you can't pay the mortgage, accepting the eviction under duress. And then there are people like me who just get their hackles up and say, no, I won't pay a mortgage or a property tax attached to my own land. It's not property, by the way. Property implies that it is legitimately part of the British Land Trust and that it is subject to the municipal trust estate rights. That's why it's called a property tax. You don't have property. You have land. You have a house. And you never gave anyone any permission to presume that you were a British subject and that your private assets were part of any kind of British national trust. Anyway, that whole ball of wax is being brought forward and is hitting splat in the middle of the United Nations and also on the laps of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and a great many other people because of what they did to me, trying to shut me up and harass me and coerce me and, and steal my stuff, just plain steal my stuff for their own benefit, their own enrichment. But because they did that, now it's being discussed and the realities of the whole system are being exposed, which is a good thing. Yes, I am suffering. Yes, I have been reduced to living in what we call the hellhole. But the silver lining is that because they made that attack against me, the nature of the entire system is being exposed at very high levels. And it is causing a chain reaction that is resulting in a lot of people that have been participating in and using this system of illegal confiscation to enrich themselves. They are getting arrested and they are going to jail and they're paying fines, and a lot of judges are losing their jobs over it. So if that's what it takes to get justice, then that's what it takes to get justice. If I have to suffer in order to blow the whistle on what's happening, as I pointed out to people, they have to actually do us harm before we have any means or right or ability to complain, right? They actually have to hurt us before we have the right to hurt them. It's sort of like playground rules. As long as they don't hit you, you've got nothing to gripe about. Well, they hit me. And guess what? There are a lot of federal employees who lost their jobs. There are going to be a lot of state employees who lose their jobs. And as they lose their jobs, they learn the truth. And as they learn the truth, they tell others. And the strange thing is that most of them, upon learning the truth, are horrified that they were part of such a thing. They're shamed. They're humbled. They want to know more about how they can come home and be an American. I regularly get people showing up who have been diehard part of the system, and they wake up and they go, oh my. And then they can't wait. They can't stop themselves. They're so hungry to know what we know. And so there's your silver lining, folks. This is what it takes to actually make the kind of headway and progress that we are now making.
Okay, next question. Can we please have an update on the progress with district courts closing? And could we get a possible timeline for a positive outcome?
Yeah, I'm pushing that hard in all of the various circles that have control of that. The excuse for the district courts being in our states begins right after the Civil War. The armistice at Appomattox was signed in April, and in May, the U.S. British Territorial Congress of the United States, the Federal Subcontractor Congress, set up a system by which military districts were created in 11 southern states, and these then had district courts. These are military courts. These military courts were charged with basically extracting war reparations from the rebel states. And the judges were chosen by Union generals of at least brigadier rank. So the president would just choose, 10 brigadier generals or above, and they would then use their personal contacts and druthers to name judges to run these district courts. And as a result, were known as the carpetbaggers. And these were members of the Bar Association, foreign jurists, who were imported to the southern states to run these district courts in these military districts. And they proceeded to rape, pillage, and plunder from behind the bench under color of law. And it was actually military confiscations in some conditions, and it was also false claims of rebellion and war reparations collections. They became bill collectors. And that's why the carpetbagger courts became so famous and so hated. Well, over time, the military realized that it wasn't popular for them to be in the middle of this, and that military districts were not popular anywhere in this country. So they turned them into quote unquote judicial districts. They changed the name, but the function and everything was the same. And so they changed the name from military district to judicial district. And they shifted the direct administration of these courts from the executive branch to the judicial branch of the government, which just meant that more British subjects at a higher level in the federal subcontractors branch of things got to sit in judgment of their brethren who were running all these district courts, and they're all bar attorneys, and they're all operating in foreign jurisdiction. And here they are, sitting plump in our states of the Union. Well, over time, they just extended this entire system of judicial districts all across the United States. And the excuse for this has remained the same, that there was a need for the district court system to be extended into the states of the Union to deal with rebels and to secure payments owed to the U.S. government corporations, including the U.S. Army Incorporated. And there was a need for these courts, these district courts, so that fights between our two federal subcontractors and their employees and franchises would have a place to settle their differences. Technically, these district courts are supposed to be hearing arguments between municipal citizens of the United States and British territorial U.S.C citizens. They're not supposed to be hearing cases brought by us. We're not in their jurisdiction. We're civilians and we're not government employees, and so really they shouldn't even be addressing us. But anyway, that's basically how the district courts, the judicial districts, were set up, and that's how the district courts came to be operating in the states of the Union, where they actually have no right to be and no purpose in being here, no legitimate purpose. District courts should be in the District of Columbia, and that includes especially municipal courts. The municipal government is limited by the Constitution of the United States and the United States of America, both constitutions, to the environs of the city of Washington, D.C. Technically, they shouldn't even be in the District of Columbia outside of the city, and they shouldn't be in the states of the Union at all, but they got invited along by the Brits. The Brits basically made the argument that they needed the services provided by the municipal government, and therefore they were offering the municipal government a free ride, like fleas on a dog, right, to serve the territorial citizenry. And that's how they got an invite into the states of the Union, was as basically subcontractors of the British territorial federal subcontractors. Anyway, this is the story of the districts and the district courts and how they came to be in our states of the Union after the Civil War, all of it on false pretenses. Because, of course, the entire thing is illegal as hell. It was a mercenary conflict, and there's no way that they can occupy a country as mercenaries and have it be legal or lawful. The whole thing is just nothing but a gigantic shit show. And anyway, my argument is that the district courts need to retire to the District of Columbia and stay there, and that all of the assets of these corporations, which have functioned to the detriment of mankind, should be liquidated or forfeited in favor of the living people and the lawful government that they actually belong to. And we should take over the courts and run them as American common law courts, which is what we, the people, deserve and are guaranteed. So there are an awful lot of bar association members thinking twice about their profession and about the form of law that they've been enforcing and the entire prospect set before them. And not surprisingly, a large number of them are now studying American common law for the first time. And another large contingent of them are studying American admiralty law. Imagine that. Never think that your voice doesn't matter. Your voice, your intelligence, your awareness, your knowledge counts. It counts far more than you could ever think. Now, you sit there in your home, you're sitting at your kitchen table. Many of you have cleared away your dinner dishes long ago and you're waiting for bed. And you think you're just some little person all by your lonesome out there in La La Land. And yet, the creativity and power and abilities of God are within you. And your voice is the key to all of it. So think about using your voice. Think about making that phone call. Think about helping your neighbor to get a global bank account. Think about what you can do right where you are right now to make people more aware of what's going on and what kind of huge issues the entire world is facing. We are at a crossroads in human evolution, the entire evolution of mankind. And a lot of it depends on our ability to overcome our indoctrination, to perceive what's true, to reason and discern our way forward, and to change our beliefs accordingly. If you can no longer be fooled, if you can no longer be cowed, frightened into accepting something that's untrue as being true, if you can look into your own heart and know what's true, what's really true, even if it's frightening, then you are the greatest resource this world has ever had, or ever will have. This is a fight in the jurisdiction of the air. It's about your beliefs. It's about your mental acuity. It's about your ability to reason. It's about your ability to discern. If you can understand that what I'm telling you is literally true, if you can see that, you have already crossed over into an entirely different energetic timeline than the people who are still there believing that they're right and that the police are actually public officers who are believing that President Trump is their president, who are believing that they owe federal taxes on income, federal income, when they've never gotten a check from Uncle Sam, who are believing that they owe property taxes when only British subjects have property, when they are so confused that they can't tell right from wrong, up from down, right from left. These poor people, they've been just continuously bombarded from the time that they were small, from the time they were in kindergarten, you know? I'm not mad at Kim Cooper for spreading salacious, untrue rumors about me and about what I've done and who I am and what I'm not mad at her. I understand. People who are as deeply indoctrinated as Kim are like children who've been misled by an evil Uncle Ernie, somebody that they trusted, or groups of people that they trusted, got hold of them at an early age and filled them full of all sorts of false suppositions and assumptions about what was what. And it's extremely hard for them to see what's right in front of their face. But those of us who have a more rational approach, who are more evidence-based, who follow our gut, we don't have any trouble seeing what's true about this situation. We don't have any trouble following the history and connecting the dots. We know for a fact that England has always been our enemy. We know for a fact that President Trump is acting as commander-in-chief and that that is a naval office and that it is attached to a corporation which is British. We don't have any trouble knowing who's who and what's what. And I just want to say that, Kevin Annett has said some unkind things about me, and I've said some unkind things about him. And the crux of the issue was never that the criminals should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. They should be. I never disagreed. However, there's been a war going on in Ireland for 500 and I believe 14 years between Protestant sects of what purports to be Christianity and Roman Catholic proponents of what proposes to be Christianity. And those fights have been so severe for so long. Generations have been embroiled. Many, many people have been killed. Businesses have been destroyed. Families have been uprooted in Protestant versus Catholic fighting, even today. And when Kevin switched his entire focus to the Roman Catholic Church after having discovered the crime in his own Protestant church, it didn't make sense to me. I stopped and said, "Hey, Kevin, what's going on? You started out as an Anglican, or maybe it's Unitarian, but a Protestant clergyman who discovered the disappearances and abuses of the residential schools in Canada and lost your job over it, right? So why is it that all of a sudden it's nothing but Roman Catholic, Roman Catholic, Roman Catholic, Roman Catholic?" I did not want to support a witch hunt against Roman Catholics uniquely. In my view, a crime is a crime is a crime, whoever or whatever religion is committing it. I mean, if you're raping and murdering children, I don't care if you're Protestant or Catholic, but I do not want to see a situation where one religious group is being targeted as the bad guy when other religious groups are guilty of the same thing. So that was my question to Kevin Annett, and he didn't answer it for a long time, which left me wondering, is this some sort of a sectarian, promotion of some sort of Protestant versus Catholic sectarian battle that we're gearing up for here? It turned out that Kevin had, in the course of his investigations, found out that the source of the problem was the Roman Catholic Church. And that's why he switched his almost entire focus to exposing the Roman Catholic Church for this. Doesn't mean that the Protestant churches weren't doing the same thing. And so I just want everybody to stay balanced and keep their eyes on the truth. And the truth is that both the Protestant and Catholic Church residential schools were guilty of abuse of the children, and children disappeared without a trace from these residential schools. And this is something that should concern us all. Anyway, that's been the bone I picked with Kevin Annett, and that I would do the same thing again, because I'm staunchly opposed to any sectarian battles, and I'm in favor of healing over whatever sectarian issues there are. It makes no sense for quote unquote Christians to be killing each other. So that's where I am at this fine day.
Next question. An ASN that has done his/her 1779 two witness statements and all the spiel, but not actively in the assembly and have not converted his or her business to private. Can he/she set up a vendor account on their GFG account on the tab that read create vendor account? True or not that in order to set up a business vendor account on GFG, it has to be private and not LLC?
That is my understanding. But perhaps the more practical issue is, are you ready and able to accept AFD, gold-backed, asset-backed money as payment for services? I have not discussed whether or not an LLC could post with the vendor account services, but what would make more sense is that you form an unincorporated business and operate it as a pass-through, so that you had an unincorporated business on the land and an incorporated business on the sea. Because ultimately what's going to happen is that all of the sea jurisdiction business is going to get converted to American Admiralty. Unless you're actually doing international exchanges with a different country. And so for all domestic purposes, what you would have would be an unincorporated business that would be functioning on the land and soil, right? And you would have an incorporated business under American Admiralty functioning on the sea jurisdiction. So you might have to dissolve your current LLC and come up with a slightly different name in order to incorporate using American Admiralty law, or you might not. I'm not sure yet. That is a really good question for us to research. But that change of flag can occur and should occur. These are really good questions. Maybe we can return to that question next week, and I can have some time to research and get together with Hunter and we can try to see our way through this.
Okie dokie. Next one. In a recent letter back in April or May, you templated instructions for personal demand letters and individual demand for performance and correction letter. Is this letter that also protect your children from being in the draft if you are an ASN and have done a baby deed?
Yep. Yeah, we're demanding recognition as American civilians. Look at the situation. None of our states were involved in anything called the American Civil War. All of the entities that were involved in the American Civil War were businesses. It was the state of New York that went to war. It was the state of South Carolina that went to war. It wasn't New York. It wasn't South Carolina. Okay, so it was a mercenary conflict the entire way. It did not affect our states. It did not affect us. The American civilian population of the nation states are clean as a whistle. There's no excuse for what they've done here. And we have every right and reason to make them officially aware of who we are, and that they are misaddressing us, and that no, they cannot impose upon or presume upon our young people, because guess what, folks? Take this home, take this to heart, take it to where you live, okay? Press ganging and forced participation, conscription of people into mercenary forces and armed forces in general has been illegal and unlawful for the better part of 200 years. And all peonage and enslavement has been unlawful since 1926, worldwide. When you step into your true birthright identity as a New Yorker, a South Carolinian, a Texan, a Floridian, a Californian, they got nothing to say. That is what's causing such a great upheaval, is the realization that they have nothing to say to us. And that their entire occupation of this country has been illegal. What's really startling them, what's really bringing the walls down, is when they look at me and I say I'm a Wisconsinite. Right there, that invokes the constitutions on them. I don't have to say anything more. That says I'm an American, oath the guarantees of the constitutions, and you are obligated to protect me and my assets. And if you don't, you're in violation of international law and treaty. That's what's scaring the hell out of them, is that we finally are invoking, properly identifying ourselves, and demanding that they provide us with good faith service. That's why it's such a pain in Governor Dunleavy's butt, and that's why it's such a problem for Susan M. Carney, the state of Alaska Supreme Court judge, that I called upon them for protection as a Wisconsinite, as an American civilian who bought land in Alaska. And they failed their duty and their good faith service obligations to protect me from their municipal subcontractors. They violated their oath. They violated their constitutional obligations under contract, and they violated the treaties that our American government established with the British government, including the British Crown. And I know it. And I'm holding them feet first to the fire. And I have proof that they were served. And it's the same thing with Mr. Daniel Applegate, the DOJ agent trying to allege that this thing that he made up and put on paper, this thing that he called Anna M. Reisinger von Reitz, is anything but a legal fiction. While he, Daniel Applegate, owes me everything. He's a bar association member, a foreigner here under the Residence Act. He's a British esquire claiming that I owe him money and I owe his corporation money when he and his corporation have failed to provide remedy that was promised to me and my grandmother back in 1933. When essentially they have taken all means to pay debt away from the American people so that we can't pay a debt. And they have refused the debt swap arrangement that they offered as remedy. He thinks that his statutes and codes apply to me, and they do not apply to any Wisconsinite. And I have no contract, no obligation, and no service obligation beyond maintaining the peace. That is, as long as I don't slap him, or shoot him, or stab him, I'm holding up my end of the bargain. As long as I don't physically assault him, I've done all that I'm required to do as a peaceable American. Okay, so I've held up my end of it. He's the one who is out of line. He's the one who's trespassing. He's the one who's committing aggravated identity theft. He's the one who is making false claims in commerce. He's the one who is trying to substitute his legal fiction creation for me. Okay? He's the one who is here without any reason to be here. Now, he's ignorant, obviously, or he wouldn't be doing what he's doing. But is ignorance a carte blanche, one size fits all excuse for not knowing the law and obeying it? He's a bar attorney. He's supposed to know what the Constitution say. He's supposed to know who the parties to the Constitutions are. He's supposed to know who gets the constitutional guarantees. He's supposed to know who are actually federal employees and citizens and who are not. He is supposed to know the definition of United States used in Title 26 and who is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. He has no excuse because he's a bar attorney. He has been educated to read and be able to interpret the law, including the statutory law and code. So that man has no excuse. He can plead ignorance all day long, and even his own superiors won't listen to it. So it's not me who's the culprit or the problem or the one who's ignorant or the one who is trying to escape some obligation that I have. It's Daniel Applegate who is the criminal. And he has no excuse for it because he's a bar attorney and is presumed to know the law. You see? So it's relatively easy for me to bring him in front of a jury of his own associates, his own fellow bar members, and point this out, and they have no way to avoid disbarring him. Once I raise that, he's a dead man walking as far as his profession is concerned. And it's the same with all these quote unquote federal judges. They're presumed to know the law. If they do things that are contrary to the law, then they're liable for it. I don't know why this has to happen. I don't know why people can't just play it straight, live and let live, respect the rights of your employers, admit that you've done things that weren't right, provide remedy that you've published and promised you would provide. It's really pretty simple. Unfortunately,
All right.
we're dealing with thugs.
All right. 10 minutes for this question before we hit our 7 o'clock mark, Anna. Would you please clarify what these markings on our hands look like? M, do the lines all need to be connected? Double reinforced M, what's this look like? Crescent moon, it starts under the pinky, but how far up does the line need to go towards the index finger? An intergalactic council stripe, what in tarnation is that?
Well, I'm not sure that it will show here. I'll try to show you on my hands. Can you see the M's? They're right in the center of the palms on both hands. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I can't really show you the crescent moon marks because I'd have to be able to turn around like this, right? But basically, the crescent moon marks go from between your index finger and across all the way across your palm, and you've got a half of it on one palm and a half on the other, and they come together. I can show you the galactic marks, I think. You see those deep, straight marks that come from the middle of my middle finger all the way down to my wrist? I mean, look at this. Right there. That's the galactic mark. The meaning of this has been pretty exhaustively explained by Dolores Cannon, who was educated about this from the subconscious level of people under hypnosis, who were then able to reach the levels of knowledge that explain this. And so I would recommend that you go on YouTube and look up Dolores Cannon. And she was a very wise woman. And she was very pragmatic and very simple in her approach and very truthful. She is an excellent witness to her encounters with thousands of people under hypnosis who recalled the same things, no matter what culture they came from, no matter what race, no matter what age, no matter what country, no matter what religion. At a certain level, they brought forward identical responses, the same story, the same information, no matter who it was or where they were from. A farmer from Mexico reported the same information as a captain from Connecticut, a doctor from Japan, or a teacher from India. They all said the same things. And she recounted it thousands of times so that we know that this is true, okay? It's universally true. Now, if you want to see some interesting hand marks, go look at the hand marks that Michael at, I believe it's ASMI Reiki. His channel is called Healing and Beyond on YouTube. And I recently shared a link for him. If you want to see some interesting hand marks, go look at his hand marks, because he's in the basis and in the course of doing his Reiki healings, his hands are always facing the camera, so you can always see his hands. And you'll see that he has an M that is, he's got two M's on his hand that are superimposed one on top of the other. And it's not that they're facing the same way. One M is facing this way and the other M is facing that way, and they intersect from on top. That's a very rare configuration. And that marks him as a very special healer. You can see there's an M here. That's an older M. Then you can see the current assignment M. And you can see the X right in the middle, which is another mark. This hand does not have that superimposed M in the same way, see? But it has the X, the same X. For those of you who have these marks, it means that you have a mission. And whatever that mission is, it will nudge you. It will pester you. It will push you. It will find you. It will be like a voice that follows you wherever you go, like a song that's stuck in your head. You will not have peace in your life until you find your mission and fulfill it. So you have taken on an extra burden in this life, and you came here to serve in particular roles and ways. So realizing that, it's intelligent to look around and look at yourself and look at what you just naturally do in your life and ask, well, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? And you can just literally ask that, just sitting here on a Sunday afternoon, just ask, what am I supposed to be doing? What's my mission? And you can be absolutely sure that within 30 days, you will have an answer to that question. I'm not joking. Just ask it just like that. Ask it out loud. And I guarantee you that within 30 days, you will have an answer. And you will know that it is the answer. You may not be real happy with the answer. It depends, but you'll know what the answer is. So those of you who are struggling with the realization that you're an earth angel and that you have a mission here, if you can't just observe your life and figure out what your mission is, ask. You'll be told.
Be careful what you wish for. You might wind up trying to fix someone's toilet and wind up stuck in a webinar 6 years later.
Or you might ask for a tall, leggy, red-haired girl, and your intention, ask for a tall, leggy redhead and get a tall, leggy, red-haired dog.
Yeah. All right, boss lady, it is 6:59 and time to tie it up for the night.
All right, guys. Hugs and kisses. Another week before us. Go forth and conquer. Be as peaceful as doves and as wise as serpents. And use your voice. God bless you all.
All right, bye, everybody.
Good night.